Hey everybody, welcome to the video. Let's go over the 6-game MLB DFS slate for today on Draftkings. But before we continue, as always, if you guys could just leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, you might as well hit that subscribe button. I'm here all season long trying to help you guys become better MLB DFS players, and I cover other sports as well. So if you're going to keep coming back to the channel each and every single day, or each and every single week, you might as well hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out whenever I post new content. And if you don't follow me over on social media, I'm at ChrisPennell16 on Twitter, CPen16 on IG, and if you miss more content over on Patreon, always much appreciated. We got 300 plus people. You can hop into the Discord chat, come in, hang out, ask me all the questions you want. And if you just want access to all the extra content that I put out as well, it's all available in the link in the description below, the cheat sheet with all the notes, and I do update everything throughout the entire day. So, like I said, links down below if you're interested. If not, hey, that's fine. Let's just dive into today's slate. So, kind of a weird slate, to be honest. We're starting an hour earlier than usual. We have lock at 6:05 p.m. with the Nationals-Rays game, and then the Indians-Royals game starting at around 6 p.m. Eastern, which I'm kind of glad they did include those games because there's some decent pitching options there with Zach Pleesack and Max Scherzer, and I would say Charlie Morton, but he's going to be on a bit of a pitch count, so that's kind of an issue. But if they didn't add those games, it's only a 4-game slate, and I just hate small slates. So I'm kind of glad they made it a 6-gamer, and I think we can all live with this slate starting an hour earlier. But make sure you guys get your lineups in by 6 because lock will start an hour earlier than usual. But yeah, it's like I said, it's kind of a weird slate. I talked about the slate starting an hour earlier, but the pitching's fine. But the bats, I don't really like any of the bats, to be honest. I mean, there's some okay spots, like the Indians versus Keller's fine. But even then, I'm not too excited about it. And there's just really not that many great offensive pieces that I like here. Yeah, there's some guys I like, but it's not a whole lot that stands out to me too much. But we'll break it all down. We'll start here with Max Scherzer. He comes in at 10,400. Do I think he's an absolute must-play on this slate? I don't think he's a must-play, but he's certainly the best pitcher on the slate. For looking at his numbers this season, they've been typical Max Scherzer. Now, I will say the one thing, the walks are up. Last season, they were only 5%. They're nearly double that now at 9%, but a 33% K rate, 3.27 xFIP, only a 36% hard contact rate. Yeah, he does struggle with homers a bit. He's always been prone to lefty power, which he's giving up over a home run per 9 innings. And if you're looking at his numbers, a 370 WOBA to lefties and a 191 ISO, but still over a 30% K rate, just locked down elite versus righties. But lefties have always given him a little bit of a struggle. If you're looking at the Rays splits versus righties, that's also not too encouraging. Over 100 WRC plus, 252 batting average, and a 192 team ISO. So not too excited about Max here, but if you got the money for him, I'll never talk you out of playing Max Scherzer, as he is one of the best pitchers in all of baseball. So don't love the matchup here, but like, they'll strike out a bit. I did watch Sixto Sanchez rack up like 10 strikeouts versus the Rays, and if he can do that, I think Max Scherzer can as well. And that's no slight to Sixto. He is very fun to watch that day, but like, I think Max Scherzer can certainly have a fine outing here versus the Rays. If you don't like Max Scherzer at 10,400, I get it because the matchup's not great. Well, Zach Gallen at 9,200 is also a pretty good option here. He has been excellent this season and really not that far behind Max Scherzer, and he's actually been better than him in some categories as well. On the season, only a 1-point ERA, a 3.66 xFIPS, not obviously as good as 1-point ERA, but it's still fine numbers. A 28% K rate, 8% walk rate, a high ground ball rate, only a 30% hard contact rate as well. And he's yet to have a bad game this season. Like, his game logs 28, 23, 19, 27, 21, 17, 23, and 14. So he really hasn't had a bad game. He's faced the Giants twice this season. He scored 19 and 23 points. I think he's a fine pivot off of Max Scherzer as your SP1 today. Matchup versus the Giants, I wouldn't say it's fantastic. It's kind of more middle of the road to maybe a little bit below average. But Gallen's been phenomenal this season, and also it's better to be pitching in San Francisco than it is in Arizona most days. So definitely don't mind Gallen. We also have Dinelson Lamet at 8,800. So these three guys can all be SP1s in this slate. Scherzer's, obviously, it's Max Scherzer. But then Zach Gallen, Dinelson Lamet are obviously just fine pivot. I shouldn't say obviously, but they're fine pivots off of Max Scherzer at SP1 if you want to save some money for some bats on this slate. But definitely like Lamet here. Always like targeting the Rockies away from Coors Field because they pretty much turned to mush for the most part. I mean, yeah, there's some games where I'll target the Rockies on the road, but for the most part, not going to be too interested in them, and I definitely like Lamet here, and Vegas does as well. Only 3.2 runs for the Rockies, which I think is the lowest on the slate, if I remember correctly. 67% chance for the win and 7 strikeouts over in Vegas. And he, too, has been very, very good this season. And if I'm pulling up his game log right now, 16, 12, 22, 25, 37, 11, 17, and 25. A little bit of some low scores in there with the 11 points and the 12 points, but I mean, I think he's going to be fine here. The Rockies are not a team that I'm going to be scared of, especially on the road. If this was in Coors Field, it's a different story. But definitely like Lamet. He's got that strikeout upside at 32%. There's actually 4 guys on here with a strikeout rate of over 30. But anyway, like Lamet. Walks only 8%, which it doesn't. It's not great, but it's also right on par with Zach Gallen and Max Scherzer, so I can't really complain too much about that. But I like the strikeout upside here for Dinelson Lamet. If you're looking at the Rockies splits versus righties, it's kind of hard to look at their splits overall because it's going to count in their Coors Field stats, which are going to skew this a little bit. But only 79 WRC plus, which kind of doesn't take into account of ballpark and all that fun stuff. So the Rockies are pretty bad, especially on the road versus right-handed pitching. So don't mind Lamet as your SP1 or even an SP2 on this slate. Zach Pleesack, 7,600. He seems a bit underpriced. He's been very good this season, and he gets a soft matchup versus the Royals, and I just think he's a little bit underpriced. I was really surprised when I saw his price tag. I was thinking he should probably be around mid 8K to maybe even close to 9K, but we're getting him at 7,600, so he's probably one of my more favorite pitching options on this slate. Only 3.4 implied team total for the Royals, 67% chance for the win, and he's been good this year. He's got a 2.89 xFIP, but only a 1.3 ERA, a 30% K rate. He's not walking anybody, only a 2% walk rate. And just looking at his game log this season, he only has 4 starts, but 38 points, 18, 27. And he just started versus the Royals, and he scored 25 fantasy points. So I see no reason here not to like Pleesack, and I think he's a pretty easy play, to be honest, on this slate. He's been good versus lefties and versus righties. In the matchup versus the Royals, they're just kind of pretty weak team overall. 24% K rate to righties, 235 batting average, 308 WOBA, and 90 WRC plus. So definitely like Pleesack here at that price tag. Then if you want a cheap option in Kevin Gazman at 6,100, I think he's viable here versus Arizona because he's been pretty good so far this season. If you're looking at his overall numbers, a 4.44 ERA, but he's actually got a 3.09 xFIP, so he's actually making a little bit unlucky there, and a 31% K rate, only a 5% walk rate. Power's been a bit of an issue with a near 50% hard contact rate and nearly 2 home runs per 9 innings, but he's also only 6,100. But if we're looking at his game log this year, if I can pull it up really quick, he's having a solid season, and he's the cheapest pitcher on Draftkings, which I don't really think should be the case. But 4 in his first start versus the Dodgers. But after that, 16, 16, 22, 24, 18, 15, 19. The strikeouts have been there. He just seems a little bit underpriced, in my opinion. The Diamondbacks are not a team that are going to scare me too much, especially in San Francisco. Now, they've been much worse versus lefties compared to righties, but even then, the numbers don't scare me too much. At 150 ISO, 240 average, at 307 WOBA, and a 90 WRC plus. So I think Gazman's fine at this price tag of 6,100. And then we'll move on to the bats now at this point, which, again, I'm not super excited about the bats. And as you can see, I only have about 20 guys listed here. Usually I'm at like 30 or 35. But the bats were they're kind of scarce on this slate. But Denny Jansen, sorry, I had Chad Greenless as the starter for the Yankees. It was Jordan Montgomery. But anyway, Danny Jansen here at 3,500. We're going to be in Toronto, and technically we're going to be in Buffalo. And that park's been definitely a hitter's park so far. I mean, a lot of the games when they've been playing in Buffalo have been very high scoring. So I think we can certainly use the Blue Jays here. Now, Jordan Montgomery, not someone I typically say, oh, I got to stack against Jordan Montgomery today. But his last start, he got absolutely shelled. He didn't even last an inning, and I think we can use pretty much most of the Blue Jays here. I mean, again, it's a hitter's park, and they have a team total of nearly 5 on this slate, and for the most part, they're fairly priced. So I think we can certainly look to the Blue Jays here. Danny Jansen's always been someone I like versus lefties. His numbers this season aren't too impressive, but he's fine here. I like the righties versus Jordan Montgomery. He's got a 400 WOBA given up to them so far this season compared to a 205 to the lefties. So I like pretty much all the Blue Jays for the most part, but do prefer the righties if you're picking any. Roberto Perez, 3,300. So again, the offenses on this slate aren't great. I'm surprised the Padres aren't higher than 4.74. But as of right now, the Indians have the highest team total versus Brad Keller. Now, the last time they faced Keller, they didn't really do much at all, and Keller's not really been a terrible pitcher so far this season. But I guess they do grade as the best offense, which doesn't sound great because I don't love this spot. Keller's not a gas can. but it is what it is on this slate. Roberto Perez, numbers aren't going to impress you, but if you're using Indians, Perez is fine at 3,300 for, I guess, the best stack on the slate. Although I will say, Keller's not been like bad by any means. He's only given up a 144 WOBA to righties this season. A little bit worse versus the lefties. So if anything, I prefer lefties here, but I mean, I was running out of catcher options, so I threw in Roberto Perez and then Varsho here at 2,000. He's the minimum price. You could also look at Carson Kelly as well. But I do like Gazman. I like Gazman more than I like the Arizona bats, but I will say the Arizona bats are very, very cheap. Like, pretty much the entire lineup's cheap. I don't have David Peralta listed here or Cole Calhoun, but they are all playable. But I had more interest in Kevin Gazman with how good he's been so far this season. For looking at Varsho splits, there's really nothing to look at too much. He hasn't really had too many at-bats this season, but it's pretty much just if you need an absolute bare minimum punt, he's fine. He's done well the past 2 games as well, just homered recently. Dropping down to first base, we have Vlad here at 4,500 going against Jordan Montgomery. I said I prefer the righties here, and Vlad, he's been crushing lefties so far this season with a 537 slugging and a 341 ISO and only a 12% K rate. So Vlad, power righty here versus Jordan Montgomery in a hitter-friendly park with a team total of nearly 5. I think he's a fine option here. Rowdy Tellez, 4,000. People might shy away from the lefty-on-lefty matchup, but Tellez has been good versus lefties the past 2 seasons. And so far this year, that's holding true with a 333 batting average to left-handed pitching this season. Now, the power hasn't been there with a less than .1 ISO, but Tellez is cheap, 4,000. I think he's fine. He donged yesterday, and he's been doing well the past 2 slates. So don't mind Tellez at 4,000, especially if he's batting cleanup. Then Carlos Santana, 3,700. I feel like he's going to end up being popular because of the price tag, and most people will flock to the Indians because as of right now, they have the highest team total on the slate. But Santana is pretty good versus lefties or versus righties. So far this season, there's been virtually no power versus right-handed pitching, but a near 400 on base percentage and 22% walk rate. So Santana's fine, especially if you're stacking up the Indians. Then dropping down to second base. Second base is absolutely barren on this slate. There's a couple of guys you could play to spend up on, but they really didn't stand out too much to me. So I picked VR here and Hernandez just because I like both teams today. And VR, he's been fine versus left-handed pitching this season. I mean, nothing great, but he's been okay. 250 batting average, 100 ISO, hasn't got any walks, but he's okay. I mean, he's not been great versus either side of the plate, but I do like all the Blue Jays on this. I almost said the Blue Sox. I don't know why. No idea. But it's 2 a.m., so you have to cut me some slack. But anyway, VR's fine. I mean, he's just the cheap part of the Blue Jays. Cesar Hernandez, 3,800, going to be leading off for the Indians, which as of right now have the highest team total on the slate. If you're looking at his splits versus righties this season, a near 300 batting average, a 354 WOBA, 120 WRC+. He's a fine option here, and I do prefer the lefties versus Brad Keller. Then dropping down to third base, we have Minnie Machado, 5,700, one of the best lefty masters in the entire league. Now, Freeland's not been awful this season, but definitely prefer righties versus him. And we got a couple of Padres listed here. But Manny Machado, look, a near 300 ISO to lefties, a 362 batting average this season, a 178 WRC+. Elite numbers all around. So if you got the money for Machado, he's going to be one of the top plays on the slate versus lefty Kyle Freeland. Looking at Freeland split this season versus righties, only a 14% K rate and a 340 WOBA, and he gave up plenty of power versus them the past 2 seasons, so definitely don't mind Machado. Jose Ramirez, 5,200. He's a guy that can be very streaky, and right now he's on the good side of streaky, where he's not like completely stumbling and not getting hits. He's doing very well recently, and I don't know if you guys saw his gem today, but and it was a ground out to third, and he caught the ball and just kind of flicked it to first base, and it was wonderful. We got the guy out. You'll have to look it up on Twitter, but it was a fantastic defensive play. But anyway, J-Ram, he's fine because he's in one of those hot streaks right now, and he's been hitting the ball very well. And he's been great versus lefties and versus righties this year. Actually been a lot better versus lefties, which, if you're looking at his usual splits, he's been a little bit better to righties, but either way, he's fine. I might see a lefty at some point, but splits have been good so far this year. Looking at his numbers, a 102 WRC+ to righties, 175 ISO. The numbers aren't as good as they are compared to the lefties, crushing lefties, but I still think J-Ram's fine. And I will tell you guys right now, I'm planning on spending up at third base and shortstop today because I think the value options really suck at those 2 positions. Meanwhile, at other spots, we can find value at first base, second base, and in the outfield as well. So I think third base and shortstop you pretty much 100% spend up for on this slate. Then Toro, since I didn't want to just list all these expensive guys, he's okay at a pretty bare minimum price tag at 2,300. Looking at his splits, he's been better versus lefties compared to righties. But if you need the value, he does have a near 350 on base percentage versus right-handed pitching this season. And Frankie Montas has been a guy that has struggled with left-handed bats this year with a near 400 WOBA given up, especially recently. So I don't mind Toro at 2,300. But again, do prefer the spend up options at these positions today on this slate. Then going down to shortstop, 2 options here. I found absolutely no value that I liked. I'm not going to play Mondesi. I wasn't liking any of the other options. You could also look at VR here at shortstop as well, but I already used him at second base. But you can use him at DraftKings at shortstop if you want. But Tatis and Lindor here, these are the 2 obvious plays in my opinion. Tatis, he's one of the best pitchers. He's one of the best players in baseball. He's elite versus lefties, elite versus righties. Near 300 ISO to lefties this season, a 40% fly ball rate, just elite numbers all around. So prefer the righties here versus Kyle Freeland and Tatis. I mean, if you got the money for Tatis and Machado, go for it. If not, I don't mind taking some salary relief with Jose Ramirez and Frankie Lindor, where you can save 500 and 800 there. But Lindor, he's a fine option here. I always prefer him versus right-handed pitching, and that's holding true so far this season with a 200 ISO, a 333 on base percentage, and I like the lefties here versus Brad Keller. And my dog's barking really loud, so I should probably see what that is because it's 2 a.m. and usually that's not a good sign. Alright, well I just checked, didn't see anything. Could have been a deer, could have been a raccoon, hopefully not a person. Either way, I think my little dog scared him away, so good job to Duke. But anyway, Frankie Lindor, obviously a fine option here. I forget what else I was saying, but really I'm just spending up at shortstop and third base today. I think you either go with the 2 Padre guys or you just go with the 2 Indians for the most part. Then dropping down to the outfield, there wasn't really anyone I liked in the spend-up spots, which I guess is fine because I plan on spending up in the infield. I can't spend up everywhere, so probably looking at mid-range and value in the outfield today. But Kyle Tucker, 4,500 here, like the lefties here versus Frankie Montas. And if you're looking at Tucker's splits this season, he's actually been great versus lefties and versus righties, so it doesn't really matter who's on the mound. But versus righties this season, a 281 ISO, 365 WOBA, it's 135 WRC plus, and a 281 batting average. And Frankie Montas, he's got a 400 WOBA to lefties this season, so definitely don't mind a couple of the lefties here on the Astros. Him and Michael Brantley both grade out pretty well. Will Myers, 4,400, just another righty on the Padres versus Kyle Freeland. He is absolutely crushing left-handed pitching so far this season. 419 ISO, a 231 WRC plus, 814 slugging, and a 400 batting average. These are kind of like JD Martinez-like numbers from last season versus lefties, over 500 WOBA. So definitely don't mind Will Myers if you're doing a little Padres righty stack action with the Will Myers, Tatis, and Machado. Definitely like all of them today versus Kyle Freeland. Randall Grichuk, 4,200. Not make the lineup on Sunday, but I would assume he's going to be back here versus Jordan Montgomery. He's been crushing left-handed pitching so far this season. 350 ISO, a 444 WOBA, 700 slugging, 348 batting average. Just has had really elite numbers versus lefties. He's not really priced accordingly either. He's only 4,200, so you're still getting good value on Grichuk, and as long as he's back in the lineup, which he should be, I think he's a fine play at only 4,200. Fran Reyes, 4,000. He has been crazy good this season, and I always prefer him versus right-handed pitching. He's a reverse splits batter. If you're looking at his splits this season, only a .034 ISO to lefties, and pretty weak numbers overall. But when it comes to the righties, he's been fantastic with a 300 ISO, a 424 WOBA, or 425 WOBA, 170 WRC plus, 336 batting average, and over a 600 slugging. So if you're stacking the Indians, Reyes has been a guy that you typically do not want to leave off your Indian stacks because he's packs a ton of power, and he's actually been one of the better Indians bats so far this year. So don't mind Reyes at only 4K. Michael Brantley, 3,600. Probably looking at like one of my more favorite plays on the slate for the price tag, and you guys know I love Michael Brantley, so anytime I can recommend him, I will do so. But once again, he's got great splits versus righties with a 330 batting average, a 200 ISO, a 380 on base percentage, and a 160 WRC plus. He is striking out more than he has been the past few seasons. He's not 15% to righties, but 3,600 like the lefties here versus Montas. Certainly don't mind Brantley. Tyler Naquin, 3,200. He crushes Royals pitching. I didn't actually know this until I was watching the broadcast of how drastic this was. But in his career versus the Royals, he's got some insane splits. Like, I think they said the majority of his home runs in his career have came versus the Royals and most of his production. So Not that it really means anything, kind of just depends on who the pitcher is, but the Royals don't typically have the best pitching. And while Keller's not awful, I wouldn't say he's great either. And if you're looking at Naquin splits versus righties this season, it's been good. 317 batting average, 317 ISO, 154 WRC plus with a 635 slugging. It's been pretty good for him so far this year, so definitely don't mind Naquin as a cheap part of Indian stacks. Then Victor Robles here at 2,100. It's pretty much the bare minimum price tag, and he should be leading off. Now, Charlie Morton's not a guy I like using bats against, but he's just really cheap. Now, he's been better versus lefties, but as long as he's leading off, if he's not, I guess that's a different scenario. But if he is, I think he's fine. Now, he's kind of sucked versus righties, but he's okay. He's okay because he's just dirt cheap at 2,100. Hopefully, you don't have to go down this far, but he's there if you need him at 2,100. But I think that's going to be it for the video, guys. I hope it was helpful. If it was, remember to leave a like. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. It really helps me out. I really do appreciate it. I got a bug bite on my arm. It's itching me very bad. But yeah, I actually had an NFL video posted this morning, so if you want to check that out, feel free to do that. And that's going to be it. So I hope you enjoy your Monday. No, it's never the most fun day of the week, but we can get through it. We'll be to NFL weekend, week 1, very, very soon.